All right. Yo, welcome back to another episode of NAPTIME with Dr. Miyabe Shields. In these episodes, we're going to talk about what we have going on for our educational nonprofit, the Network of Applied Pharmacognosy. And we're also going to talk about just some really cool science things that we are just going to vibe about. But we first really want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this episode, which is also a donation to the nonprofit. So thanks so much to MCR Labs.
MCR Labs is a premier analytical laboratory in Massachusetts, Maine, and New York, and we have actually worked really close with their team in the past. We love their team. We've hung out and chilled with a bunch of people on their team, and we really vibe with how they are passionate about research and promoting public education in the community, which is something we're actually going to talk about in this episode. And we've got some awesome planned collaborations too in the future. So just so grateful for them as sponsors. And yeah, huge shout out.
So thank you, MCR Labs. We'll talk about an event we attended from MCR Labs in this episode, but we really appreciate your support and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Man, I've been on a flower break, because of I was sick. And I love flower. I love liquid diamonds too, but it's different. I mean, they're definitely different. I do still think that there's something there about the distillate. And people were messaging me being like, well, distillate doesn't have terpenes. And I was like, no, I'm talking about distillate with terpenes. Like, I've had distillate with cannabis-derived terpenes added back into it. I've had distillate with the HTE, which is high terp extract, right? Like, I've had distillate with that put back into it, and I still get that anxiety, heady, rushy type of feeling from it. And I don't get that from liquid diamonds. Like, I really don't. And I think it's fascinating because it's super high THC percentage.
Well, I think part of that could also be your tolerance is a lot higher now than it has been in the past, and maybe that has something to do with it too.
That's fair. That's definitely true. I've been thinking about this too, about the tolerance situation, about how a piece of that had to do with the ability to dose. Like the literal, just ability to properly assess properly assess what my brain feels like and being like, oh no, you do need more than that.
Yeah.
You got to keep hitting that if you want that anxiety to go away. And I think that it's an interesting thing because I'm reminded about it regularly. At some point last year, I was reminded about it where I had an epiphany and I was like, oh right, my brain likes high doses. It likes a lot of weed. And
yeah, because you were low dose for a long time,
years and years actually.
Yeah, almost always smoking hemp flower. At least partially, and then just trying to take the minimum dose, which worked for you for a bit, but
I don't know.
I agree. The high dose
it's hard to know if that was working for me. You know what I mean? I was pretty compared to how I am now, I'm way chiller now, but my life is way better now. So it's
that's a good point.
I
feel like I've always been a medium dose person. I definitely have people that smoke a lot more than me, but compared to an average person, I think I probably also smoke more than them. So
I think that both of us are medium for the industry, but high for the general population.
Oh my God. I was talking to some of Jake's coworkers and they're like, oh, well, I could never smoke a whole joint. And I was like, oh, I could. I'm like, that's exactly what I do. It's a perfect serving size. But I do understand, if you're not a regular user, a full joint, it seems like that would be a serving size. But for, a new user, that would just get you absolutely blasted.
Yeah, it's too much. I mean, even, I feel like I genuinely around the 250 to 500 range, even still. But that's straight THC flower. If I mixed it with hemp, I could get all the way up to the 1-2 gram thing. Whenever I do blunts and stuff, I usually put hemp in it. because I just feel like
I love
can't
blunts,
handle.
but
I'm going
to be honest. I don't know how to roll a blunt. I don't know how to do that.
No, I know.
So
You
I
told
need
me
to
that.
learn.
Remember when I was like, and I got to teach you, but then it was so late and we had just like, that was the nonprofit launch party. Nonprofit launch party.
But I can roll this joint this size in literally 30 seconds. This is like my easiest thing in the world. And then my best friend Heather, like the reason I fell in love with her is watching her roll a blunt. So she's always been the blunt roller. Like of
you,
the
you
friend
haven't
group.
needed one.
I
Yeah,
haven't
it's
needed to
like-
roll a blunt because I
Yeah.
usually save blunts for like special occasions, and Heather's always
Yeah.
there. So it's like, why do I need to learn how to roll a blunt? But still on my
Oh, man.
2024 New Year's resolution.
I mean, it's pretty simple. Or it's like pretty similar to rolling a joint, I guess. That's what I would say. But I also like cheat all the time and just empty out swishers. Like I'm total trash. Like I'll just like cheat it, you know?
Yeah, I would like to learn the cheating form and the non-cheating form just to have it in my repertoire.
The cheating form is you just empty out the tobacco out of the swisher and then you shove weed in the end with like a thing and pack it down. And it's like, but it works. just saying,
Yeah.
it'll always work. And then the non-cheating way is it's pretty much just like a joint. I mean, I think like one of the differences is just the texture of the texture of the wrap is much thicker, and so the tension's a little bit different. But like the physics is the same. So like the physics of how you make it tight is the same. It's just the texture of the actual paper.
Right.
Is
Once you
different,
have
so-
that hand motion down, I feel like you can roll a bunch of different things. And I'm growing like 5 different varieties of tobacco this year, literally to learn
Yes.
to roll blunts. Like the
Oh,
purpose
that's
is
amazing.
for blunt rolling. So I'll keep you
s-
up to date on that.
I'm obsessed with that. I mean, you're not keeping. I'm coming over. Like inviting
Yeah, it's gonna be
myself.
awesome.
Don't have to invite myself. I'm driving up. Like when
Yeah,
when it's
guest
ready
room's
to
open.
when it's ready to roll. Like that's amazing. I actually really love tobacco and weed together, and there's something about it that has always really helped my brain. But I benefit from tobacco, so that's another common thing that I think is an interesting neurotype difference between, you know, some people don't really like it at all. Like it makes them feel sick and like, you know.
It's made me feel sick in the past, but I think that's just because I had too much. Like I think I like
Yeah,
small
I
amounts
mean,
of
we've all-
tobacco. I don't
Ugh.
like a ton.
Big amounts of tobacco where you're sick and you're like nauseous is like just that's the worst. Like I don't
Oh, the first time I ever tried
Just don't
nicotine was my friend and I like stole a cigar from a wedding, like at a pretty young age. We must have been like fucking 14 years old or something. But
Yeah.
then we
Did you
went out
inhale
back
it?
like then we went out back and we
Oh.
smoked like a lot of it. And then I was like, my world is
shit.
spinning and I feel sick, and I like projectile vomited from the cigar.
It's horrible. It's a terrible
Yeah.
story.
So that was that.
Oh my gosh. All right.
I should probably get our list of things to talk about.
Today, I've got it up.
I think
So-
we should recap the MCR event too, and that can also just boost up some of the people like Jill and
Yeah, Jeff.
Jeff. Yeah.
Last year, the science fair was a really difficult event for me. It was our last day working together, and there was like a lot of emotional. It's like I feel like we never really talked about this, but it was just like weird because we have worked together for at that point, like almost 2 years. Like, wait, a year and a half, where it was like,
Yeah, there was a lot of like, I think just questioning in the air. Like we had no idea if we were ever gonna like see each other work together, like do anything together again. So
it
that was
so
definitely
weird.
It was weird.
so
It was very just isolating too. Like we were both kind of there,
Yeah.
but like representing different things, and at the
Oh,
super
God.
like
I was not
transient part.
representing. I was not representing anything well. Like in that.
Well, this year I thought was really fun though. I had a very
It
hectic
was.
morning, but I
Oh,
think
man,
you
yeah, you had-
set up perfectly. So thank you for that and taking that over. It was so funny. So I was
You had a
running
day.
like 2 hours behind because I
You
live
had
very
ice-
far
you
away.
had ice though. You had snow and ice, and that's gnarly.
Yeah, it was like terrible conditions, but I still got there. I was just late. And it was so funny. Literally, right when I pulled up, Miyabe comes running out with a vape in their hand, just being like, here you go. And I was like, I need
I
this.
knew I knew it was needed.
It was amazing.
Like, holy shit. Like that morning for you went to the wrong parking lot or something, and then and then I'm like, where the fuck are you? Like, where?
Well, I typed in the address, but I didn't type in the right town. So then I literally traveled from Cambridge to Somerville.
Oh,
and then I like pull up to this residential neighborhood, and I'm like, I messed up. This is not a parking garage. So then so then I had to go back to Cambridge. Ugh.
I'm gonna explain it for people who haven't driven around Boston, because if you haven't driven around Boston, you don't quite understand how annoying that like distance is. Like a mile in Cambridge and Somerville is like, they're like residential one-way roads. There's a bunch of things that are called squares that are circles or trapezoids or like pentagons.
Everything's like a one-way road. There's nowhere to turn around.
Because we were having people come smell the sauce. So is they're extracts, right? They're flavorant extracts that have like terps in them, but also have other volatiles. And we were having people come smell the aromas and say like, rank these aromas from your most to least favorite. And it was so nice because like it just smelled great. Like,
oh, the whole place smelled. I mean, it smelled like weed. I mean, these are literally like extracts of the smells of weed. But they smelled really interesting, and it was such a cool little experiment too, because we always say the nose knows. Like certain people are attracted to certain varieties of cannabis because it just meshes with your body really well and kind of provides it with what it needs. And we saw that, which is really cool. Is Jill and her family stopped by, and their entire family voted for the same strain as the one that they liked the best, which we were all like, that's really interesting. Like, is that related to genetics? Is that related to preference? Is that related to the smells at their home? Like, what does that mean that an entire family like is attracted to the same variety?
I don't think that I ever would have thought that played a role, but it makes sense. The receptors have mutations all the time, and like olfactory receptors are, and on top of that, like we know that certain genetics control taste, and I think they're related. I think the receptors for taste are related to smell, or at least that smell is.
Oh, they have to be. I mean, they are related because they're part of your genome, right? Like it's all related. But yeah, I don't know how. I never even thought to ask like my brothers what their favorite strains are, and like and see if that meshes with mine.
I also was so cool to meet Jill's kids. I've heard so much about them, and also like our friend Bo, who is doing AI work, and was there in the space. We had a lot of friends there, which was cool this year. Like we had like a crew of
it was really cool because we've been
stoner scientists. Yeah.
And we've been like really kind of building this community for a while, and it's so cool to see everyone support each other, even if they're not like presenting at the MCR Labs Science Fair. Either way, they're still there. They're still there with their families, supporting you, asking questions, taking pictures. It just like, it feels really good.
And having kids there and talking to kids and being like I'm going to throw it out there. Like, I love kids. Like Lane and I aren't planning on having them, but like I love children. I think that their brains are really interesting and fun, and like I don't think that there's any reason why at a science fair that was a non-consumption event, why kids shouldn't be present learning and
I
being
thought that was
I thought it was
so
great.
Cool. So Jill brought her, I think, 5 kids, and they weren't the only kids there either. Angela brought her kids. We saw other kids there. And it's
Bo
just
had his
cool
kids were there all day tabling with him.
And the cannabis community is very safe. Like people are very open and very like aware of that. And there's nothing dangerous happening here. We're just talking about the research we're doing and how it impacts community and science. So it was really cool just to see that is kind of getting breached by all different demographics, and that people feel safe bringing their kids there, and that they know that we're going to, talk about science with them, getting interested in science and natural products.
Well, knowing someone like that is interested in your interests when you're young too, and being able to actually answer some of the questions, because like kids are inherently curious, and like it's impossible to think that your parents would know the answer to everything. And so it's really cool, especially with the exposure and the education around substances and what role do they play in our lives, for kids to be introduced to it as, hey, the role that these are playing in our lives is that they're helping us, and that we're using them with the intention of helping us to have a higher quality of life, and that, if I had known any of that information, I mean, I just didn't even understand what a prescription was either, though, or a poison. Like, I didn't have a good concept of that difference until like after my until starting research. Then I was like, why did it take me this pathway to be able to understand it? And then it's like, because there's no public education on it. Like,
right. And we talk about
like,
this all the time
oh
about
my
like
gosh.
implementing drug education at a young age, right when we introduce sex education too.
Yes.
But talking about it in this way of like, this is kind of part of your life. This is something you're going to be introduced to throughout your life. There are a lot of positives, but also like anything in moderation and anything with education is a lot safer than just saying, hey, complete abstinence is the only way to go about sex and drugs. Good luck out there. I'm sure all of you will never touch this again, right? Like it just like, and obviously these kids, most of them, like their parents are in the weed world and scientists in many cases. So, they're getting that like top tier education, and it's not introduced in a negative light, but you just hope that like other kids have the opportunity to have this less stigmatized view of especially cannabis. But also other natural medicines, other pharmaceuticals, and just like talk to kids and teens in a mature way. They want to know this information, so we should be able to provide it and provide context to it.
I think that you and I have this opinion, though, because as when we make our content, we're trying to make it understandable to everyone. And so like when I think about the level that I'm trying to teach, when I'm trying to teach everyone, it's actually quite young. And it's like the simpler you can make a concept, actually always the easier it is to understand by anyone of any age. And so we have this opinion because we would know exactly how we would do it. Like if someone was to come to us and be like, hey, do you want to design a course for literal children? We would be like, yes. We'll tell them what a poison is. We'll teach them that something can kill you so they know not to drink the bleach under the sink. We'll introduce the notion of like cough medicine and like things that kids take, right? Like when you're sick, like be like, I have to take a fever reducer. What is
just
a fever?
Understanding
like,
the things that go into your body like are acting on your body. And again, like there is a dangerous level to many things, but many things can be used safely and have a lot of therapeutic value. You just need to understand how to understand that.
I just got such a good idea. We should rebrand this as just pharmacology education. And because it does start with just pharmacology, like we likely wouldn't.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
Exactly. Let's call it that. And then we won't call it cannabis education, but cannabis will just be included amongst all of the other things because you might as well cover all of them. You have to. You can't also just cover cannabis. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think it would just be interesting to cover different systems and how different drugs and natural products like work on that system. I think we should do this. Who wants to fund this? Someone reach out.
I would definitely do this. I mean, it would be great to pilot it in a controlled space where then you take feedback and then we could see because there's also so much more accessibility that it really does make sense to start young because our friends' kids are getting exposed to it in middle school and that is young. I mean,
well, and kids see it on the internet now. They're taking in so much more information than pre-internet kids. So it's they are mature enough for these conversations. And if you don't bring it up with them or people you trust don't bring it up with them, somebody else is. And we don't know what that education is going to look like. So we might as well provide it from a trusted source.
Oh my God. You don't want to know what that education is like because it's just kind of do whatever and figure it out. And then you end up in dangerous situations where you're well, that could have been avoided if I had had more information going in.
Yeah, I've thought about that many times through my life.
Self-experimentation. Oh my God. So
Oops,
it's
wrong dose.
But the thing is, no one wants to hear that opinion, right? Because it's this fear-based system and it perpetuates itself. And I don't know. I think we got to do it. Actually, I think that maybe we could do it and we could just start with short videos. We should make cartoons.
I think that would be a really good segment of our YouTube is
someone should draw a stop animation. A little thing.
Wait,
and
this
then
is
someone
such a perfect YouTube
sing
thing?
sing it into a Vox box. because I saw someone do that and I loved it. I watched every video in a row. I was like, this is my favorite.
Can AI just animate us? Is that like mean to cut out the illustrator?
I think that we might have to try. You know, it'd be kind of cool.
Okay.
What if we had it do it in ASCII? Have you ever seen ASCII text, or is that you're too young for that? Maybe, I don't know.
Dude, yeah, I don't know.
Do you know what ASCII is? You know what ASCII is?
No.
Oh man, dating myself, dude. So back in the day, the computers used to not have images, and ASCII images are they're made out of text, but they're pictures, and the different letters are different.
Oh, I've seen those. I didn't know they're called ASCII. Yeah, I've seen like AI
actually, I don't
on
know
the
if
way
I'm
messages.
am I pronouncing that right? Maybe I don't. Oh, that might not be how it's pronounced.
Is this the chitin story again?
Oh God, what was I called? Chitin.
Chitin, yeah. And I'm like, man, I've never heard of that. That's crazy.
What is chitin? I'd never heard it been said before. It's like spelled
It's really hard. I find that with like a lot of natural products, like especially like different terpenes, like a lot of people have just never heard them pronounced before. So we're all like doing our best, but what is the right way? I have no idea. Is there a right way?
I mean, I think for a lot of things, there's just like the way that people have said it for a long time and it like sticks. I don't know. I'm not convinced that there's like truly a right or a wrong way to say anything. But then I've heard certain words be pronounced wrong, and I was like, okay, maybe that was wrong. But I can't think of an example, like, off the top of my head. I mean, I kind of just go with like, say what you're gonna say that's confident. That's like,
yeah, I don't care either. You know, whatever like vibes with the message you're trying to give, like that's fine. I don't think you need to like explain it either, because especially if you think of a specific word and how it's pronounced in different cultures and different areas, like there's no consistency, so there's no need to be consistent. Just say whatever resonates with you.
All right, we're starting our own cannabis dialect right now, everyone. We're going to have our own dialect where we just pronounce these words whatever they are, because who knows how they're pronounced, and like we're just going to do it. Because actually the more important thing is that we're delivering the information, right? Like that's the goal.
Speaking of delivering information, should we drop in this podcast episode that we want to start a journal?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like it makes sense because I feel like we've both already talked about it. I definitely sent someone like a public message today that was like, we're going to start
I think we are, though. It only makes sense. Well, this is a goal of ours, is to start like an academic type journal, but for it to heavily talk about like personal experience with a certain plant or extract or product, and saying like, hey, this is my experience, this is how my body is, this is how my brain is, I tried this, it worked really well, these are my measured outcomes, etc. But also have other areas of the journal like new extraction methods in cannabis or other natural products, you know, talking about things that are often like just below the rigor that would be published in an academic journal, but still, you know, very important for us to learn about these different products and how they're used and how they're being extracted, and other cultures, Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine. What are other cultures and other people doing, and how can we share that in like a professional space that's like really outlining in a consistent way what we're doing.
I think another important piece of this that will be really cool is that we'll have people submit the data in such a way that it's easy to work with, and so that other people can do research from our information. Like, we're going to intentionally format our data to be used and to be open to other people. And that is just going to open up the doors for anyone who is a data scientist and wants to like mine through whoever wants to share their experiences. And we have a lot of evidence that everyone out there, like, you want to share your experiences, and that this plant helps you, and that we should help each other, and we should be putting that information out there. And so we are definitely, you know, this is just the next step, because we have to be able to do it in a way where we have the language the same. We can universalize, like, this is a great place to shout out the Effective Cannabis newsletter team, Debbie.
I was just gonna do that. Yes,
William,
perfect
like,
spot.
This is the place, because they have been working on standardizing language and creating like a term sheet, and I think it's so important, and we need to establish what we're going to call different things, and we have to always call it the same thing. And that's another thing this journal can help do, is we can help by publishing all these protocols. Like, Yeah, I saw a cool thing where the hash was getting made by static electricity. That was cool.
I've heard of that too. Someone in Vermont
Yeah.
does it. I want to see them do it. I'm
Oh, I
I'm
want to see
very
it.
excited. If I get the invite, I'll invite you too, because that like sounds
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
But one other thing
Do.
about the EC newsletter, and I will also add their website to the show notes here. If you guys could sign up for that newsletter, it's a great resource for learning about your ECS and learning about cannabis and learning about these different cannabinoids. But also, if you want to share your lived experience, you can do that. They have a forum like on their website where you can submit your story and share that with them, and it can be shared with their network too. But I think it could be anonymous or not. I'm not really sure there, but you should definitely, if you have a unique story, if you have a unique product that works for you, definitely share it on their website. They are like some of the coolest people working in cannabis, and they seriously care about like the patient, the people, the consumer.
It really shows in how invested they are, like into both of our like what we both stand for individually as people, and it feels so good to be seen by others in the space who are on this like very similar mission, because there's so many people. The industry is quite, I wrote it today. I was like full send. The industry can be predatory, especially in the sciences, actually, and like the medical and sciences part of the industry specifically, like has its own specific problems. But it's so nice to feel so seen and feel so respected, and like, the value that they have for the plant and then for the people is something that I'm so appreciative of, because I feel like it's really been this year for me, like figuring out what that priority is for me, and like, I don't
And
know.
I think the industry definitely can be predatory. And I was actually talking to someone today. Shout out to Rachel Kolick. I was talking to Rachel today, and she was just talking about a few trends in the industry, but she was specifically talking about how women in the industry are often kind of just like looked like kind of tossed aside, especially in the business realm of things. But she said, she's worked financially with so many different cannabis companies, and the women run companies are typically doing significantly better. And also, like, adding to that conversation, I think
Yes.
when we're talking about like healing and medicine and trust and learning from your body, women have always been the healers. We've always been the healers in society. And I think that kind of when even we see like interactions online, there's many men doing a great job, but I'm saying like I look to the woman in the natural products in the cannabis industry, because that sense of empathy, that sense of healing and community, like that comes off very strong with many of the women, where sometimes I don't get that same feeling with some other creators or some other people. And that's always kind of just spoke to me, because I've always been kind of like Jake and I are, he's more on the hunter, I'm more on like the medicine, the gatherer type, but like the healing aspect to me has always been very motherly, very like womanly. That's kind of part of that, I don't know, the persona. And I think that's why a lot of people inherently trust the women in our industry.
I also feel like another piece of this puzzle has to do with how we're socialized and how we, in general, are encouraged, like women and people who are raised like under the female archetype of always getting along with others, and versus boys, we encourage them to be independent, right? So it's also a piece of that has to do with like the way that we're brought up is more community oriented just in the first place, and so it's easier for our brains to have community oriented and community benefited priorities, and
Ooh,
that's what.
that's a great segue into weird brains, which I think might be worth just touching on for a second, because
Oh, that's gonna be
um,
fun. Yeah,
yeah, so this
it's
is
gonna be
really
fun.
cool. We're going to be working with some people next year and doing some panels and talking about kind of building off of this stoner neurotype, but just understanding like the weird brain a little more. And essentially we're talking about how cannabis can kind of be this like gateway drug into a life where you aren't necessarily confined by political or social norms, where you want to be more independent, where you want to be able to be in charge of your own medicine and your own food. And I say that in a joking way. It's really an exit drug for many different things. But we're gonna start writing about this a little bit more, because we think that cannabis kind of really shapes your brain in a unique way, and it kind of brings similar minded people together. And part of that is also in the actual physical act of how we consume cannabis often, which is typically in circles and group settings, often away from the majority. You're kind of creating this separate little hub of maybe outcasts. And this also ties into an episode that's going to be later in the season about cannabis and circus, and how circus people have always kind of been kind of these outliers of society, and same with cannabis. And like we're really starting to dig into this more and start to understand, does cannabis shape the brain, or is the brain already like that and it just responds very well to cannabis in some of these people, and just at least starting the conversation around it.
I think both things can be true there.
I think so too.
That both things are true of that. And I want to point out that something that's been really important to me recently that I've been thinking about with cannabis is ritual. And there are so many rituals in cannabis use, the social aspect and the bonding that occurs. And it's not everyone who feels this way, but for a lot of us who are like regular users and like medical users and like whatever you want to call us, high needs users, stoners, the stoner neurotype, we benefit so much from this plant, and the way that it does shape our brain, both the way our brain is shaped that we benefit so much from it, and then the way that the plant then shapes us back, right? Both of those things comes to a point where we feel so much relief and camaraderie. We are a community. Like, there is a inherent trust that I have with big time stoners, because I know where we overlap,
where they're at, just like, and where their values are at. And I think that's, and oftentimes we talk about how the higher you get up in many cannabis companies, the less likely you are to use cannabis. And I think that's transition. Really messed up. Yeah. I mean, well, yeah, I mean, we'll get to LinkedIn too, but I mean, we as like regular cannabis consumers like should be running this industry. Like, we are the people who people trust. We are the people who have the experience with the plant. We have communities around this plant, and we love it. Our entire lives are shaped around it, to the extent that we make careers out of it, and that we cannot live without it. It is part of us. It's part of our lifestyle. So like, why wouldn't we thrive in this industry? We need to make space for those people, and maybe have a little less space for the people who don't love the plant and don't love the community, and maybe look down on people who consume every day. Like, that is not okay to have people in power in those positions in this industry.
I'm going to say something a little intense.
Toss it out there.
All right. I feel religious about this plant. When I saw it grow earlier this year for the first time, I mean, like, when I saw it, I told you this, like, I don't remember who we were talking to. We were talking with someone. Stoner Chicks. Shout out Stoner Chicks pod. That was fun. We were talking to them about the favorite month to smoke weed, and I said that mine had changed this year, because seeing the plants in their full bloom, these giant, majestic, like, just beautiful. The leaves are beautiful. It's beautiful from the moment that it sprouts till the moment that you're drying it, to the moment that you're processing it and smoking it and turning it into hash and all sorts of other cool stuff. Like, it's the most beautiful plant. I spent all spring like singing to them in the greenhouse every morning. I was over there. Like, I love that plant. It's my medicine. I'm obsessed with it, but I also love it. And it has a very divine feeling to me when I think of how much it's helped me in my life.
I think there's a lot of religiosity around like anything. I think healing, and that brings community in that way, but especially when it is a natural product, because it's like also this connection with Mother Earth. Like, I made a post today about today's the solstice. That's extremely special to Jake and I. Like, we don't really celebrate Christmas. Like, we'll do the dance, but like, I'm not really a Christian, so like it doesn't really make sense to me. But like the solstice to us is like we work pretty much like 24/7. We run 3 different businesses. We're always working, and it's like today we are literally taking time to make quality food that's going to feed us for a long time. You know, we're making food together. We're going to eat the food. We're going to decorate our tree that was harvested from our property. And we're just going to like not work and just enjoy this day, because after today, the days get longer. We're able to have more time outside. And it's really beautiful, like these different ways that we can gauge how bountiful Mother Nature is or how much she has to rest. Like it's a cool holiday.
I think that this knowledge that you and Jake have brought into my life and mine and Lane's lives is fascinatingly, it's the reason why the very first time I gave you the chemodiversity presentation, like within 5 minutes, you had changed my mind about some part of it. And I was like, whoa, that is so intense, because I had already thought so much about it. I thought, at least, but then when we met, I thought about it exponentially more. And that was
right.
really
And
cool.
That's also like all I studied in grad school is like chemodiversity and like really just what's it called? Like polypharmacology is like all natural products are. So you never look at it in isolation.
All natural products have many, many, many active things in them at the same time. Like tea and coffee have like hundreds of molecules in them, right? Like we know this. Alcohols do too, like even the ones that are distilled. But it's like anything that comes from a living being is not going to be formulated. It can't be. It's nature. It's messy. It's imperfect. And that variability can have a therapeutic benefit. And that's where this all kind of, the big theory that started our friendship, I think that kickstarted us to becoming friends, was this like the idea that we forged together with this chemodiversity and the stress response in the body to all of the different molecules, and how it applies to cannabis, how it applies to all the different cannabis products and how they're different, right?
Let me just give a little background too, just for any listener who's like, what are you talking about? So when we talk about chemodiversity, we're really talking about the chemical diversity of natural products. So oftentimes we're referring to cannabis because that's what we talk about the most. So this is saying like, instead of just taking pure THC or pure CBD, which is an isolated molecule that's very pharmaceutical in nature, it's a pure isolated molecule, typically at high doses. Instead, when you look at nature, you have a lot of redundancy. You have a lot of similar molecules that might act in slightly different ways, and they have a different purpose for that plant, but they're made through similar biochemical pathways. Because, I mean, nature and energy systems, like they're one and the same. You always have to look at it from an energy standpoint. And so every natural product, from the most simple thing to the most complicated thing, is always making more than one molecule. It's always making hundreds of molecules that act in synergy and act in stress response in different ways and creates, different active compounds. And that is such a different way of looking at medicine compared to that isolated pharmaceutical pure compound. Because now it's like, if you have a therapeutic effect from a natural product, it's likely from more than one molecule. And it's very hard to pinpoint exactly what's going on there. And you don't have to pinpoint what's going on there. All you have to do is understand that nature is making that medicine and it's working with your body in a specific way, and that there's enhanced therapeutic value to having a more diverse and chemically rich extract compared to a single molecule formulation.
Man, it's coming back to me now why we vibed so much in the beginning, because we haven't talked about this in a while, actually, because we kind of were like, we need to table this. We're not ready. When we were talking about how we want to explain the theory and, really be able to say, like, because you studied the chemodiversity or the vast array of molecules in the natural plant, and that knowledge to me, I loved to hear. And until I talked to you, I didn't realize how similar it is to the chemical diversity that we have inside us, in our brains and in our bodies. And that's what I specialized in, and what I looked at was the endocannabinoid system. And when people think of it, they think of anandamide, right? I mean, that's the first endocannabinoid that anyone knows. But there's 2-AG, which is arguably more powerful, which is the other quote-unquote standard endocannabinoid. But
I don't
there's
even think that's
tons of,
arguable. I think the data is like pretty freaking clear that 2AG runs the show, and it's just
well,
like less sexy of a name.
it's more potent, that's for sure. I think it serves its own purpose, and it has this thing where it like self-sequesters in separate pools throughout the cell, which is interesting. But I think there's a balance. It's similar to CBD and THC, how when you balance it, you can have like a more nuanced effect. And I think it's something like that maybe they're in like a ratio to one another.
Well, I mean, they both exist for a reason, right? They're working in synergy for different purposes. So why are we even comparing which one's better? They're both incredibly important.
Right. No, it's like and then different levels help different people. So it's like it's true in the plant, and then you see it and it's mirrored back in the body. And then on top of that, there's other vanilloids, or sometimes they're called elmeric acids, that are basically the same thing as endocannabinoids with different ends. There's actually one that is serotonin attached to arachidonic acid, which is like the main endocannabinoid.
And that's published in our chapter that we published together.
Oh, shoot.
It
is. Oh, man.
That is linked on my Patreon. I did upload that. So if you want to read that, you can find it there. But also what you're kind of talking about is like, we never talk about chemodiversity from a human perspective, like that our bodies are chemodiverse, that we create all of these.
We have so many molecules.
Right.
We
create these similar like molecules of redundancy in our own body. And how when we look at our system and how we have these similar molecules and we have these receptors with these different active sites that are just different enough to fit different molecules, and then you combine that with how diverse natural products are and the potential of some molecule in that formulation being able to bind even slightly to some of these receptors in our body, the chances of the therapeutic value of having a chemodiverse person with a chemodiverse extract are much higher than having a single molecule, which is not chemodiverse, with a chemodiverse person. Like the options are limited in that case.
Also, our body is just used to managing things in more more fluid states of modification. Like, if you were to naturally change anything inside our bodies, it wouldn't be like a hard stop that like every receptor in the body would immediately be antagonized or blocked, right?
Right.
That's not...
Yeah.
And I mean, it doesn't happen immediately like that with pharmaceuticals either, but it's a much more rapid interaction with your body, and it's not as full processing. And there's a ton of things that we don't know still about. Well, we do know certain things, right? We do know that in natural products, like there are some molecules that are like almost generically in a lot of different natural products that just stimulate the immune system.
Exactly. And also there's just a lot of bacteria that is almost always in natural products. If you're extracting them in like ethanol or something, you're also going to be extracting bacteria from the outside. And we know that bacteria have components in the cell that are inflammatory to our body when we take them in. And that inflammation is not always a bad thing. It can be a good thing too. I learned a lot of this from Dr. Naja Chek. She is an amazing resource for information about bacteria and the immune system and what it means to be like, healthy in that way for stimulating your immune system. But anyway, I think we're going to continue to do research on chemodiversity because we think it's extremely important to look at medicine from this perspective. And again, like, this is not something we are like so innovative for looking at. This is traditional medicine. We're looking at traditional Chinese medicine. We're looking at Ayurvedic medicine. We're understanding Native American medicine. Like, we are understanding with modern tools what that means of like having these really diverse extracts, or what time of year the plant was extracted, or the different components of the plant, or if there's sometimes, you can have great synergies where it's beneficial, but you can also have synergies where it's less beneficial. Is that something we can study too? It's just kind of this way of thinking more than like a specific research project. It's more of like the way that we want to conduct our research is in favor of using diverse extracts over pure compounds, which are almost always used in research because it limits the amount of variables. But I think we're going to be doing both, and hopefully we'll start, we have actually a really cool project planned with pure compounds in the future. Yeah, should we talk about that?
Yeah. Well, actually, I just got them last week, so that was exciting.
I just got mine too, so that's why I was like, oh, this is like really cool.
Shout out Kyle from Future. What's up?
Yeah.
Like, thank you, man. We're going to do some research with these isolates, and we're going to see I want to do a bunch of research with them. Actually, I want to do membrane perturbations. I want
I
to
think we
see
should.
membrane perturbation. Yeah.
Yes, and pair that with in silico data too. But let's give more context.
Yeah! Okay. Yeah.
So Kyle from Future Compounds, which shout out to them. They are not only doing great education, but they make great products. They have given us some pure compounds, and for a while, I've really been wanting to do a study where we take pure compounds like CBN, CBG, CBD, THCV, and we give them to people blinded, and we say, hey, they're not like physically blinded, they just don't know which product they have, so it's like a blinded study, and we just have them document how they feel from taking these different products. And the reason we want to do this is because there's so much marketing in cannabis, like so much marketing that says, take this product, it will make you less hungry, take this product, it's going to help you sleep, take this product, it's going to help with pain. And we have a lot of data to back that up, but we don't have a lot of data on people taking these products and not having an expectation of what's about to happen. So if we could have some blinded data to go along with the biochemical data that we have from studies looking in essentially petri dishes, that would be really compelling to start to understand the value of these different products, the dose of these different products that should be used, and then we can get more complicated and think about this in a chemodiverse extract and say, okay, cool. So we know, CBN does XYZ. What happens when we add it to this type of product?
That just gave me the way you phrased that was so good, and it just gave me a really good idea. So
keep riffing.
Let's have Lane blind us as the first trial, and we'll start should we tell them about the documentary idea about how we react so different to things, because we're different. Like there's ways that we're similar. We're both messy little raccoons. That's the similarity.
Yeah, definitely raccoon
overlap.
status.
But there's, in almost all of the other ways, we're very, very different, and we react differently to things. It's fascinating.
Oh yeah. I mean, you're definitely much more, you respond better to things that are like downers. I talked about this introducing you, I think, in the first nap time, like
definitely
more like, and oh god, this is where we talked about Todd too, where he was like, oh, like you're opposites, so like
like we were the drugs on each other's brain.
Exactly. So like I'm like like my personality is like a benzo, like I am low and slow.
I think I said when he was talking about it, I think my exact reaction was I impulsively replied with like, you're a total downer, and then I was like, no offense.
Yeah, literally. No, like
in the best
you don't
way,
even know.
You
don't even know how much it takes to like make me mad. Like it's a lot. Like I don't react. It takes a lot. So I'm like low and slow, like chilling almost always. Miyabe's like like 110 miles per hour all the time, which is good. I mean, it's a good thing. But
not
it's
all
funny
the time.
because. But I mean, this is also the thing with like, opposites attract, as far as who you attract for your friends and your partner and all that kind of stuff. Because like, I don't know if I'd want to hang out with myself all day. Like it probably, I don't know. It's like you kind of want someone who's the opposite of you. And then we also respond to the opposite types of weed, where like I am a definite downer person, so I'm looking for upper weed all the time. Whereas you've always responded to more of your like indica types, your perps, like the ones that are typically kind of relaxing and sedating.
I've just like thought it was interesting for a while that we could characterize all the separate little pieces through the drug experiences, because when you're altering your mind and your perception, like, the pharmacology, and I know that with natural products there's always room for variability, but to the most part, like, we're going to be able to get very detailed information on systems within both of our brains that at least a few of the systems are clearly deviating from the average, right? Like for both of us. So I think it's going to be really exciting, and it's something that this was the idea that we had after we were just like chilling for a while. Like, one of the ways in which we are trying to break a systemic barrier in cannabis and also just in like society is we would like to like normalize a different style of relationship with the people who you work with and what that environment can look like. And yeah, how we can do it. And I
100,000%. I think both of us are working better than we ever have before because we have the freedom to like do what we need to do for lifestyle changes in order to be like in our brains in a good place, like almost always. And that includes like, I think we've talked about this before, but open consumption whenever you want. Like we'll be in meetings and one of us is almost always like rolling up or like, you know, whatever. Or like we were supposed to record this podcast 2 days ago and I texted Miyabe and I'm like, yeah, can we not? Like, I don't want to, I don't want to do this right now. Can we like reschedule this? Dude, and you're like, yeah, absolutely.
that night you were like, and you sewed this beautiful hat, but you are gonna, you were sewing 2 mittens and I was like building a shower. So we both had our things that we like had to do too. And I mean, like, I think that's another thing that when we're talking about, you know, what it is like and to be the most able or productive, like I don't like the word productive, like I don't like the word produce because
I know it's
fun.
tough.
Well, because it's fun when like working with you is fun. I like love chatting and all of our ideas and what we're doing and like what we're starting and the movement that it has and the movement that it's already made. Like it's so much fun and it can be, it's most of your life. We spend so much of our lives working that the like idea that you wouldn't love that time too is so foreign to me because I'm just, I know maybe it's also that I spent so much of my life literally wanting to die that now that I want to live, I'm like, I want to live though, like the whole time. Like,
well, yeah. And I think, you know, as you're talking about, I'm sewing mittens, you're doing a bathroom, like we are both like, I have a whole separate business that I own outside of cannabis where it's a lot of sewing. It's a lot of like very hands-on work. And Miyabe does a ton of hands-on work too. You work at the farm and you're always like doing stuff around your house. So, I mean, I think for both of us, it's like we need to be able to do those other parts of our lives. And we are willing to work literally all the time if we can support ourselves rather than working for someone else and like being mentally in a bad space, because that is so spiraling. As you're saying, you work so much of your life. And if you are unhappy at your job, you're probably pretty unhappy in general. And obviously that comes from a place of privilege. I can say that because now I'm self-employed. But, you know, I've worked for people I've absolutely hated, and my quality of life during that part of my life was terrible. Even the relationships with my friends and my family, like it was all terrible because I wasn't happy because I was spending 9 hours a day being around people in environments where I didn't want to be. So it's like at this point in my life, I would rather literally work all the time toward something that can grow myself and my business and I can be in charge of my mental space and keep that peace rather than having to sacrifice that for something else.
Well, some of us just need more accommodation than others. And like the lifestyle accommodation that we're talking about is really just a medical dose schedule. I mean, there's other ways to look at it. Like there's all these different ways that we could call it what it is, but it's that we benefit from the regular and consistent use of cannabis for our creativity, but also productivity. We have all these other things that we need, like sensory inputs like manual labor and like getting outside. And we have needs. And I would argue that most humans actually have those needs, and that it's just in the culture that we don't value that aspect of quality of life over it, and that companies could do it if they wanted to too.
And there are some good companies. I should say that there are some good companies out there for
True.
real. Like I have a lot of friends in the industry that work at dispensaries or these different companies. Specifically, I'm thinking about some dispensaries that their staff light up like together before it opens every day. And that's like part of that ritual of like, we're about to help people. We're part of this healing community. Let's heal ourselves first so we can give the best customer service possible. And you know what? They're all happy and they've all been there for a really long time. So, you know, that is the result of allowing your employees to consume during work. And it's same thing like going to these different weed events. Like, you should be able to openly consume at weed events if you're working in the weed industry, because like how on earth are you? if your company thinks that you're not going to be operating as well because you're using cannabis, then that's pretty backwards for for working in the industry and not letting people consume while you're trying to sell other people cannabis products.
This is why stoners need to be influential people in the decision making of the industry, because we have just so much more inherent knowledge than people who don't regularly consume. Because it's not just regularly consume, quote unquote. It's literally our lives and our quality of lives, our medicine, our community, our people, and our understanding. And it's just another reason why we need to do that. And it's been really liberating, though, being more open and being more able to talk about everything. I mean, not everything, but like a lot, right? About cannabis and about mental health and about quality of life and priorities. And so much of that absolutely comes from everyone else and all of their stories. And like both of us have just, so much of our lives have changed by just hearing from other people, your stories. Like we carry them with us, they're not, I'm never without them, and it's powerful. It's very, very cool. And so we really appreciate that. And that's something that, the title of this section about like what we're trying to do and who we're trying to work with is that we are being very, very intentional with what and who we and why we do anything that we do. And we're not going to be claimed to be perfect, because no one is. And we're certainly going to make mistakes. And I'm sure we already have. And like you find out later, right? Like,
well, I do want to talk about this a little bit more. So just to give some context, like somebody shared one of the videos that I made that was updating people on the progress of the current study that we're doing, and kind of just showing like general demographic and what data we've gotten so far. And somebody else was just commenting on it, essentially saying like, this isn't real research because you didn't acquire data in the right way, blah, 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 blah. And, people were getting really upset about it. And I think to us, it doesn't make us upset. It's actually kind of a sign that we're doing something right. We are breaking these systems, these systemic barriers. We are including people in research who have never been included in research. We're talking about women. We're talking about LGBTQ. We're talking about anyone who's, research has been very narrow for a long time. And with that being said, we want to also represent anyone in this survey. So we would love to share the survey with more men and more older people, but like the people who have taken the survey so far fit a certain demographic, and that's totally fine. But for us to say the research is illegitimate is saying that those 5,000 people don't exist and that they didn't take time every day for 2 weeks to tell us about their use patterns of cannabis, and that we don't have this really unique data set that's never, ever been even talked about in science before. So again, like, this research is not finished yet. We have 5,000 respondents. We want 10,000. The survey is still open. You should 100% share it with your friends and family. If we can get 100,000 respondents, that would be amazing. Cool. Like, the sky's the limit. So yeah, this in a huge core competency of NAP and of what we're doing is to share with our community. So the reason I made that video before the research is done is to thank you guys for taking the time to do that research and to share your story every single day and to share your dosing and for trusting us with that research. And because you trust me with that, I'm going to share that back with you and show what the initial data is like. And you know what? Next time we have 10,000 people, I'm going to share it again before it's published. And I'm going to keep doing this because my relationship with you guys is so much more important than my research with the classic academic that is really not doing anything to maybe help our community. I really want to emphasize our voices, the voices who've never been researched or studied before. So to me, it just says that we're doing something right and that we should keep going.
I absolutely agree. Like, I think that what it points to is, there's always going to be like a dying roar. There's always going to, and I'm not saying that we're even close to being there yet, because I would argue we're kind of the beginning, or we're nearer to the beginning than we are to the end of this battle of what it is and isn't valid, right? And there's so much going on here with the bias of how valid data is. Actually, I have a beautiful quote. I think it was Marnay. Marnay said, when there is some random arbitrary value of significance that has to be met for no reason other than it's a criteria to be met, then that, and when lived experience doesn't meet like these standards, that's when you're coming up against like a systemic inequity, misogyny, racism, like heteronormativity. Like you're coming up against like these like a big barrier, because this is why this research hasn't been done. And I'd argue that it also has to do with disability, and that, you know, this is something that's so important to us, and that it feels really good. So for all those people who have the negative things, like it's like we get a lot of negativity just because we put a lot of things out there, and there's so much positivity, like it's overwhelmingly positive. And so to me now, and it took me a long time to get here, I used to get sad, I used to get hurt. I mean, like, it really hurt me. And I was always like, it doesn't hurt me, but then inside I was like aching, you know. I was like, my feelings are so hurt.
Oh,
like,
I want to talk about that though, because I mean, my skin is so thick from being on like TikTok and Instagram. Like
now it's like
people literally hate me. Yeah.
Full send. Thanks for the engagement.
So it was actually really, really cool to see, you know, on LinkedIn, people are talking about this, whatever. And then the amount of messages I got from people just wanting to help spread our message because they think what we're doing is really cool. So, for instance, shout out to Fat Nugs Magazine, because they're going to do a piece on our study and our research. And I'm going to include all the amazing comments that people left on those videos showing that they're feeling validated and represented for the first time ever. And, you know, we're again talking about how the survey is still open and that people should keep taking it. We have people at different dispensaries around the United States being like, I want to hang flyers with your survey on it so that more and more people can take this. So it really led to a lot of positivity in the right direction. And I think that's always kind of what we should be looking for, is not necessarily the people trying to shoot us down, but who are the people who are building us up? You know, who are the people who see that and don't want to take part in it and don't want to continue that narrative that we've been having for so long? Instead, like, how can I create change in the right direction? And I'm just saying, like, I notice it, and I'm mentally like, thank you so much to everyone who shows support in that way.
We have gotten so much positivity, so much positive feedback about the survey and how it has helped people. And it's honestly like, it makes me feel really emotional. Like, I think it's just really like, it's so important to me that someone shared like within a story about the survey that, you know, they'd participated in many scientific surveys and research projects before, and always like for different aspects of autism, but that this survey was the first survey where it actually felt like maybe we're changing something, like something is happening here that's different, and it feels powerful. And recently also there's been another content creator, there's been a couple content creators and also just people in our personal lives who have told us that the things that we've been doing and saying and educating and spreading and teaching about are affecting people in a way that helps them to understand and to go pursue things that then they go on to make changes. I mean,
actually, you know what? Somebody said
so
that
powerful.
they started smoking weed on their podcast because they saw me smoking weed on this podcast. So I'm going to light up again for literally just the purpose of that comment, because shout out.
I'm going to do it too. Hell yeah.
That made me feel so cool. So this one's for you.
Love it. I also love the open consumption. I like that as a rule. We should write that into the employee handbook.
Yeah, actually, I want to
Open
put it in my
consumption
podcast
policies.
notes too, because I was just saying that to someone recently. I'm like, you can consume if you want. And they were like, oh, I just did before this because I didn't know if I could consume on air. And I'm like, yeah, I should put that in writing.
Yeah, you should put it in the show notes. That's perfect. Oh man.
I'm going to.
That's the best. No, so it's been really powerful. And the survey has helped people. The survey also has helped people to better understand their relationship with cannabis. It's helped people become more intentional. And I just I can't put into words exactly the feeling. It's in my chest. It's like a lot of pressure. And I think it's pride. I mean, pride is definitely part of it. I've never been so proud of anything before. And like, that's just, it feels so full circle because some of the data points are like the first things that we ever worked on together. And like now and also I want to touch on the men thing. Like, so when we were at the science fair, a couple students came up and said, like, I'm wondering, like, why is your demographic mostly female or non-binary? Like, why is your demographic so skewed? Like, there's, like, only 30% men. And I was like, well, that's just the demographic of people who are open to learning things from people who look like Riley and I. Like, that's just the answer. And there are a lot of men. We have over 1,000 men in the study. It's still a very significant
significant
value. It's a
and there's
huge
also
amount.
data just like women in general take surveys more than men. Like that is also a data point that we need to acknowledge.
I don't even care. It's enough men. I don't care. I don't think we need more. Just the good ones. Like, why?
I think we need more. Sign up for a survey.
Okay, that's true. No, you're right. I'm just saying, like, the argument of, like, why does it have to be 50-50? I just don't think that's true.
I don't think it needs to be 50-50, especially when women are often underrepresented in almost all scientific studies.
Well, because you could just always split. You just always split and then analyze the data separately, and then it's analyze all the statistics separately. Like, it's... But this is why I think that what we're doing with science and what we're trying to do with cannabis is like the sign that it's working is the amount of pushback that
I agree. I mean,
received.
To make change, you're going to be a little bit controversial, and like that's okay to have different opinions too. I mean, a lot of people are scared of change, and that's okay. And also, I think we should we talk about some of the future studies that we want to do? I know we talked about the isolate study. Should we talk about anything with Corey, or is it too early to talk about that?
I really want to. Maybe we should talk to Corey. But
yeah,
I want to talk about all of the research that we have planted. We have a lot of seeds planted in collaborations between industrial partners and our nonprofit, and also academic partners and our nonprofit. And so I think it's probably best that we don't disclose anything until we submit that grant or whatever.
You're right. Let's not do that. But let's talk about that too, though, because a lot of the like fundraising we've been doing is like crowdsource fundraising, and we're hoping that's very short term. Our aim is to get sponsorships from industrial partners who want to sponsor like a specific study or a specific component of what we're doing. You know, I shouldn't name drop. Never mind. I'm not going to talk about that. But that is what our plans are, and to apply for these large grants. You know, we're both associated with research universities, and these universities also like understand that we need to start highlighting the consumer and the relevant perspective of how this affects people. And, you know, we're a great avenue to connect academic research, industrial research, and consumer research.
I think that we can talk about SOS and our plan for that. What?
I'm so excited about SOS.
I think that we could talk about that because we are actively seeking funding for it as of this exact moment. And SOS stands for we're just like SOS. SOS stands for the science of smokability.
This is going to be a series of research experiments in collaboration with Dr. Allison Justice and the Hemp Mine. And we are going to essentially change different factors, and then we're going to do experiments to see how it affects the smokability of the flower. So that's like during the dry and cure process, but also during the growing process of what nutrients are available to that plant and how does that affect the final product and how that final product feels.
It's so cool because Dr. Allison Justice has the Cannabis Research Coalition, and both of us are on the scientific advisory board, and Allison's on our board. So we have a really intimate knowledge of each other's like capabilities, specialties, like what we can overlap in, and we're going to be able to see from the plant all the way to us. That's going to be
Yeah.
cool.
So I like my brain only thinks in 5-year plan, which is probably like not a good thing, but I'm always thinking like big
I think
picture.
it's a great thing.
Always thinking big picture. So immediately when we started talking about science of smokability, I'm like, let's make this a research festival. Like, let's make this a big thing where consumers can come and try these different products, like, and then vote on which ones they think smoke the best. And then we can have this huge data set of these different people trying these different variables and how they affect the smokability. And of course, we'll have like music and like a bunch of other stuff too. But I think it could be so much fun to have that like community research in that way.
I think it would be so cool to also get a testing lab on board and make it into a farmer's market and have people test their home grow.
Or
and
Orange Photonics.
Or like, yeah, we can test on site. See, I think we need to start having science in community in casual, very casual conditions. Because going to a scientific conference is not something that people are going to ever do. It's not enjoyable.
Oh, dude, half the time
honestly.
I don't want to be there. Like, I'm like, feeling a little stale. But I mean, I agree. It's not, and the information's not presented for the general public, right? Like, it needs to be presented in a different way that's such way more entertaining, much more gamified and playful. And then I think people would really, really care about it. It's like people care about cannabis science. It's just never really presented in a way that's accessible.
And we have all these plans for how we would do it different if we had the funding to support all of these endeavors. Like, there are ways that that you could construct artistic and interesting pathways or environments for people that they navigate where you can gather data along the way and it'll be fun. It's like Riley said, it's gamified. It's an experience, but it's also collecting data. And we know this because we both have incredibly short attention spans. Like, yeah. That's another similarity. Like,
yeah. And I think that's just kind of, a lot of that is like the creative brain, but at the same time, it's great to work with somebody with a long attention span too. I feel like we need somebody like that part of our regular brainstorming.
No, that is true. I think the other thing too is that both of us are so imaginative. We have like very hyperactive imaginations.
Oh, well, I'm going to boost us up again because I really think like a lot of the visions I originally had for things like come true. Like they can come to fruition because of like, I think our ideas are practical enough that they can, like, I always think of my wedding as the example of this. I like imagined my wedding and then I planned it. And that, like, that's how I went about planning a wedding. And I think it's the same thing for like a weed event too, where it's like, oh, I can imagine that in my head and then I can plan around it.
I totally agree, except that I was so anxious before your wedding. And I'm going to throw it out there that at your wedding, Jake came up to me at the end of the night, grabbed me on the shoulders and said, "Thank you for your anxiety, Miyabe."
Yeah. Yeah, this is why I'm saying we need to work in pairs because like I'm good at imagining. I'm not always good at executing and planning, but like I know it has to happen.
I'll handle the day of. I mean, I actually really get a really interesting buzz off of running events. Event people are interesting. Like I've worked a lot of different types of events and stuff. And
dude, same with like working as a waitress too. Yeah. I feel like that's the same thing where it's like that. I loved being a waitress. I thought that was I did it for like 6 years and I would still do it right now if I had time, honestly. Like the people you meet and just the fast pace and then all the good food you get to try. I really enjoyed it.
You're like, I need that stimulation.
I know. I'm like, should I? No.
Should I? No, you have too much work for
yeah,
sure.
Don't do it.
Like
don't
both of us. Yeah, both of us don't need another job. Like, just But the thing that's really cool, going all the way back to the survey, that I want to touch on just one last time about please sharing it with people, is that when people come up to us and see themselves in the data, when we were at the MCR Harvard Science Fair, Adam, shout out to Adam, drove all the way out from Pennsylvania in one day to come see the data. And he was like, I participated in this and I wanted to come see it and meet you guys. And he helped us break down. It was so awesome.
So cool. And Starbucks, like he got coffees. It was just like, yeah, it was really, really, really cool to meet him in person. And just, again, it's like that community aspect of that event. It was not a huge event, but I bet we knew like a quarter of the people there. Like, that is so cool to have these events that like bring people together in that way, and you can just like, look forward to seeing people and meet people from your network that you didn't even know like existed, but when you meet them you're like, this is awesome.
It's so powerful for us to be together like that. And I felt that when we actually saw a good amount of them in Vegas as well. And like it's a core feeling of, you know, recognition and trust, and that we've all consumed together. Like, yeah, cannabis brings everyone together. There's just so much more trust there, and I'm definitely
100%. Like Adam was like, I need to use cannabis, and we're like, we got you. Like, let's go step outside. Like, absolutely. We are the same way. You did the same thing for me when I showed up. Like, that is community. It's being like, I need to dose myself 5 minutes ago.
Help me, please. And then we're like, pen, like flower. It's like it's like coming out of all arms, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like when I was leaving to go meet you at the car, I was like sprinting out, and Brett was like, Miyabe, like, are you okay? Like, are you okay? And I was at the door and I was like, Riley needs this. Riley needs it so bad.
Oh, also really cool, like just after parties from the MCR event. So yeah. What was the first one called?
We went to Asia, Trellatech's Raspberry Parfait. And there was like, cool. Everyone had a hat on, and you were like, everyone has a hat on but me. And then I turn around, you have a fucking beret on. Like, what?
I got a beret. That was awesome. And I love when the Grav Bong comes out at events. I think that is so fun. I remember bringing my Grav Bong, the studded glass one. I brought that to Halloween this year, and it was so funny because I was like, oh, I'm going to bring like a really fun piece to smoke out of. Brought a Grav Bong, and everyone's like, I haven't smoked a Grav Bong since like high school, but now we have these really fancy Grav Bongs and they're really fun. And that was at the event, so that was really cool. And I got to talk to Corey from Harbor House, and he's just like a wealth of knowledge. Got to try his Piatella. That was amazing. Oh, what a good night.
He has an interesting story about how he lost his sense of smell, and now all of their genetics are like taste, like cultivated for taste, and they have very unique flavors of smoke of their flower. Like, I noticed
I think we should go there and interview him for this podcast.
Ooh, that would be a fun field trip. Their facility is fucking cool. Like,
I think it'd be really cool.
Oh man, let's do it. I'm sure he's game. Like, and then actually I would love to see someone press. I would love to video that.
Like, that'd be fun.
I watch those videos all the time.
We'll just talk about future plans too. Also, in 3 minutes it's going to be 4:20, and then I think we should wrap up this episode and then go enjoy the solstice.
Sounds perfect. So yeah, everyone, thanks so much. Like, I feel like this has been so crazy, and it's so nice to see. Like, one thing I did want to touch on from the data that we didn't talk about in the last episode because we hadn't done it yet was that 64% of people started consuming before noon, and that's a significant percentage, and that 32% of people have either 5 or more doses per a day, so you're consuming regularly per day. And so I'm part of that 32%. I'm also part of that 64%. So if you multiply those two together, which I should have done that before this, but here, I'll do the math right now. Hold on. 0.64
drum roll
times what did I say the other one was? 3.2.
Yeah.
All right. 20.48. What a good number. Like the game. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime there's a 4, a 2, and a 0, you're in a good spot. But I love numerology. I'm so weird about numbers, though. You know this.
No, but I think this is cool too, especially when we start crunching the numbers of like people working and what people's general happiness is, like on a scale. Like that's going to be really interesting to see how that correlates and breaks down. And its relation to the driving statistic of like people needing to dose 5 times a day. And then it's like, okay, well, 64% of people drive. And it's like, okay, that's not that surprising, right? Like if you need to use cannabis throughout the day, and if you're in a mental space that you feel comfortable enough that that's kind of your baseline and you're okay, then you should be able to drive. Like, again, if that's your dosing regimen, are we saying like people who need to use this medicine have to stay home all the time?
Are you restricting us to our households by restricting our transportation? Because it's 20%. Let's round it up to 20.5% because that's easier to remember. But 20.5% consumed before noon more than 5 times a day. And that's 1 out of every 5. That's a significant number of people. And I don't think that it's so extreme. I know it sounds extreme, but it really doesn't feel extreme when you get to know us. Like,
yeah,
when you get to know our community.
I think, most people I know who are regular consumers consume before noon. Like most people in my network, at least. So I don't find that super surprising, but I think this is really good to get this information out to at least like start to normalize this to people. Just start telling people like, we exist everywhere. We're using cannabis regularly. Like this is part of our daily routine and our daily medicine. And yeah, we're here. This is the life we're living.
Oh, it's 420.
420. Also, I got to start dressing cooler for this podcast. Like I look like a narc in my kitty sweater and vest.
I've been literally just embracing wearing a sweatshirt to everything possible.
I like wearing cats and weed. That's my style.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
I like wearing things that are loose on my body.
Oh, yeah, I'm loose too. Actually, that's something that we think differently about, though, is you always want to be in, like, as little, like, clothes as possible, like a sports bra and shorts. And, like, I want to wear, like, ponchos and overalls.
That's true. That's a sensory thing, I think.
Yeah.
Like I think it has to
I
do
also
with
just like being warm. Like I really
right,
like
and
being warm.
I'm not cold often. Like I just run hot. Like my body runs a little hot. Cool. Well, have a great solstice. Tell Jake I say have a great solstice.
Thanks for listening. If you want to donate or learn more about what we do at the Network of Applied Pharmacognosy, you can visit that link in the show notes. But thanks anyway for listening. Mad love, and we'll catch you next week.